is My Mother at 66. Children, in this poem, the poet comments. The poet is Kamala Das, Kamaladas. Kamala Das. The poet comments on the feelings of pain and ache one feels for the aging parents. There is a single thread of thought. There are some observations of the real world around, but they are connected with the main idea. So the whole poem is in a single sentence punctuated by commas. The poet was driving from her parents' home to the Cochin airport last Friday morning. Her mother was sitting beside her. She was 66 years old. The old lady was dozing. She was sleeping. Her mouth remained open. Her face looked pale and faded. It was grey like ash. It looked lifeless like a corpse. Corpse means dead body. The lifeless and faded face of her mother pained her heart. The lifeless and faded face of her mother pained the poet's heart. The old lady seemed to be lost in her own thoughts. So she turned away her attention from her mother and looked outside. The world outside was full of life and activity. The young trees seemed running fast. The children looked happy while moving out of their homes. When they were at the airport, children, they had to undergo a security check. So the poet was standing a few yards away from her mother. She looked again at her old mother. She felt pained to look at the colorless, lifeless, and pale face of her mother. Her face looked faded like the late winter's moon, which had lost its shine and strength. This aroused the old familiar ache in the poet's heart. Her childhood fear overpowered her again. However, she controlled herself. She appeared to be normal. She scattered smiles on her face while saying goodbye to her. She wished to see her old mother again. Children, this was the summary of the poem. Now, her mother's pale face and the fact that she might not be alive when she makes her next visit, it really worried the poet. What worried the poet? That she might not be alive when she makes her next visit worried the poet. She was worried about her mother. And why was there pain in her realization, children? There was a pain in her realization because she didn't want to leave her mother. But there were some obligations which she had to fulfill. She could not stay with her mother forever. Now, the figure of speech which is used for her face like that in Asian, like it is simile. Her face Asian like a corpse, like a dead body. So simile is used in this line. Why did she put that thought away, children? She tried to put that thought away so that she would not unnecessarily worry about her mother, and tried to smile so as to reassure her that she would visit soon. She describes her mother's face to be pale and fading like the winter's moon. So, the poetic device used here is a simile. And she also refers to the childhood fear. When we are young, when we are young, we always fear of losing our parents, a fear which did not leave a child even now when we are grown up. So she told her mother that she would come back soon and everything would still be the same. The poet, actually, she was agonized at the thought of her mother's impending death. She could not reveal this to her mother and made an effort to cover her pain by smiling. So, the poetic device which is used over here is smile, smile, and smile. The poetic device is repetition, bache. And in case, how does the poet dispel by horrifying thought? She diverts her attention to the trees outside, which seem to be sprinting when seen from the moving car. The atmosphere inside the car is contrasted with the youthful images outside. Inside the car, she was looking at the pale face of her mother. Outside, she saw the youthful imagery. So there was a contrast to the weak and inactive mother. Listen very carefully. If the question comes, why does the poet use the imagery of the young children and trees? It is very important. So you will write down, the poet uses the youthful and exuberant imagery as a contrast to the weak and inactive mother. So, children, this emphasizes the old age of mother and reinforces the fact that she is nearing death. So, the poet realized that her mother was as old as she looked. Seeing her dodge with her mouth open, looking like a corpse with her ashen face, she realized with pain that she was close to death. So, in this poem, she's trying to put out all these things. She's trying to draw a contrast. Now, what is the significance of the poem? It is the finest examples of the human bonding. It describes the pain and fear of the poet. What was the pain and fear? That she might lose her mother. And it is a harsh reality. Death is the harsh reality. And she attempts to hide her fear through her elongated and superficial smile. Why has the poet brought in the image of the merry children? Children, the merry children stand as a contrast to the old mother. The mother's ashen face is a contrast to the rosy face of the children. On one side, there is an ashen face, grey face, and on the other side, the rosy faces, red faces of children, young children are merry, but the old faces are sad. So there was a contrast. Why are the young trees described as sprinting? Children, she feels that the trees in the distance are racing down. It's racing away. The time is running away. The young trees remind the poetess of her younger years, which have run by very quickly. They also remind her of the childhood days who run happily. She was running here and there and she was playing there. While the old people, like her mother, cannot move. The children can move here and there, but the old people cannot move. So, in this poem, the poetess express a deep sense of realization, and she is agonized by the thought that she might not meet her mother again. That's all, children.